Good evening. I am the Finance Chair, Trustee Jari Shelby, and I'm calling the Finance Committee meeting at 7:39 at the Broadview Village Hall. Can I get a roll call?
Yes, good evening. I'm Trustee Judy Abraham, Finance Committee member.
Fire Chief Tracy Kenny.
Police Chief Thomas Mills.
Building Commissioner David Upshaw.
And Budget Officer Tom Hood.
Stephanie Greer.
Okay, can we please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance?
I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And can we take a moment of silence? Okay, and at this time, the Budget Officer, Tom Hood, is going to cover the 2023 proposed budget.
And I invite you all to sit out here so you can see the screen.
Also, Madam Chair, I'd like you to recognize that Director Tim Hicks is here, present at the meeting.
Yes, Director Tim Hicks is present.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Can everyone hear me okay? Yes. All right, welcome everyone. We're going to run through the proposed fiscal 23 budget and try to hit some highlights and go through each department and each fund. We're going to start as soon as I can figure out how to get the computer to work here. Honestly, during the warm-up, it worked fine. There we go. Must not have hit it hard enough. It's got my kids. Okay, so the first thing I want to take a look at is our revenues projected for next year. You can see that overall, there's a slight increase of a little less than 2%. But there's a bunch of different things going on in the different revenue item lines. Property taxes are pretty much projected to increase by the CPI amount that we were allowed to apply to them of 1.5%. I know a lot of people are talking about inflation and how high it is, but that will not hit us until the next budget cycle. Other taxes are going to increase slightly. The biggest drivers in that is personal property replacement tax, and that's taxes that are replacing funds that the villages and school districts lost when the local governments lost the power to impose personal property taxes on corporations, partnerships, etc. This last year, it came in much higher than we forecasted, and I'm putting this year's estimate in there to pick up that increase. Our intergovernmental revenues are down a little bit, but that's primarily because we had a large $940,000 grant last year. This year, there is another grant that's going to offset part of that $941,000. We're expecting our second ARPA payment to come in, and our COPS grant will be in that line too. But the 10% decrease going to 11% decrease is just the difference in the size of grants that we're getting. The other lines are pretty much self-explanatory. I did want to point out charges for services are being driven primarily by the increase in what we're getting in payments for ambulance service. And that works out to a program that the chief has spearheaded that is letting us collect a little more money for our services. And then the other decrease that is substantially large is in the other category. There's a reimbursement. The other category. Last year we had a property that was going to be sold. There is no property sales in this year's forecasted revenues. What that is primarily the crossing guard reimbursement, alarm rebates, and the miscellaneous revenue from the fire department. Now, this is up to you guys. Want us to take questions now as we go through each one, or do you want to wait to the end to try to do it all? Are there any questions? Okay, we'll just go ahead then. Okay, under the executive department, there is a slight increase in personnel services, but that is because this year we're going to implement a summer workers program, a little over $19,000 to fund that. And what that is to bring in some youth to give them the experiences of working in an office and help train them for the future. The other increases are related to the healthcare increase is in general increasing 6.5%, but it also depends on which program they've taken. So healthcare is driving that. Contractual services, it's pretty much in line with what has been the past. And the big decrease in commodities is simply a change in the amount that we expect to expend on office expenses. For the village clerk's department, pretty standard. The increase that we're seeing in the department is being driven by travel expenses and seminar costs. Basically, we are trying to make sure that all of our village officials are getting the appropriate training for the positions in which they occupy. After the clerk, we have boards and commissions. There is a slight increase in boards, it's a sizable increase on a small amount, but that is being driven by the actual cost of doing testing last year. And we're budgeting more in there because it cost us more in fiscal 22 than we budgeted, and we're just reflecting the new cost of the testing services.
Excuse me.
Yes,
Could you go back?
sure can.
for me? I had just had a question on the commodities. It went from 0 to 500. I don't understand that.
In the past, anything that copies are pens, pencils, papers, anything that we need ended up going into probably the finance departments. We're just showing that some of those funds are being expended in the operations of the commission of our boards and commissions.
Okay, thank you.
And a common thing you'll see is a lot of the department's office expenses are down. We just moved that 500 into here. Next up is the finance department. The The increases are basically related to healthcare and the 1% raise. The decrease in commodities is due to the offset of the office expenses and supplies, but it is actually, there's a line item that has increased in there, and that's the third millennium program, which is our stickers. It cost us quite a bit more for last year than it did this year, so we reflected that in the line item, even though the whole category is down overall. Another increase in there was the postage expense was higher during fiscal 22 than the past. So when you look at the handout that's got the line item detail, you'll see some items are up, some items are down. But the combination in the contractual services are actually less. Okay, municipal building and grounds, that's the building we're in right now. There's no change in this budget. Now that there are not employees involved here, this has become very simple. It's the contract for the cleaning service, the contracts for the building maintenance, and commodity use which is in the building, which could be anything from cleaning supplies to paper towels to toilet paper. But we were on budget last year, and there's no big changes expected. For the building department, we're looking at an overall increase of 12.65. Now, I want to point this out. On a dollar amount, that's $62,000. But the one thing that is in building, fire, police, and public works is a $50,000 allotment of ARPA funds for them to spend on things that will help them meet their departmental needs. So right off the bat, $50,000 is a one-time increase in expenses that's being offset by the ARPA funds that we're receiving. The other things that are happening that are notable are commodities and capital outlay. That is a decrease in office equipment and office supplies from prior years. And I think that's it. That's it. Any questions about the building department? Since I've got Dave here all fired up, ready to answer. Okay, no questions. Well, let's move on. Next up is the fire department. The personal services and employee benefits are reflecting changes in step increases and contractual increases in salary. Contractual services are down. And I'm going to be honest with you, I just forgot why they're down. So I'm going to skip that one. We can come back to that unless Tracy wants to. Can you think of why the contractual service?
Stuck on employee benefits.
Okay.
Contractual services down.
Yeah, I'll have to take a look. So, and while Tim's talking, I'll look it up and let you know on the end here. Okay, commodities are down.
Employee benefits, is that a typo? You got 27 million.
Please be a typo.
That includes 27 million.
That's what you got? Yep. I know.
Oh yeah, that's a typo. Yeah, it's yeah. Which is funny is I printed this out and it's not there, so it's a typo that I've done since I've been here this evening. So it's It's 55,222.76. Yeah. Yep, that's definitely a typo.
It's not, it's not,
It's,
it's not.
It's not in the report.
yeah, it's not,
Because that's a typo, that's what it is.
yeah, it's a typo on this slide.
On the
So
side.
what's the,
For employee benefits, the fire department, the change is 55,221.76 instead of 27 million. And then 213,990.
So where's my percentage? Can you just tell me? I just wanna,
Oh, the percentage is 2.9%.
okay, so what's my overall percentage?
For the total department is actually a decrease of 1.78%.
That's it?
Yep. Yes, you've increased your budget by 445%. So if you guys see something different to what because I'm reading off paper. So yeah, I see that. I see that. What I was getting ready to say is commodities and capital outlay. For commodities, we have a savings in the amount we're spending on uniforms. The repair and maintenance of breathing equipment was there before, and it's not there now because that was I believe that was a grant, wasn't it? Yeah, it was a grant. Mhm. And then the capital outlay, there was a decrease in maintenance and equipment. All right. Now I'm gonna have to look at the screen too. On the police side, police side's pretty straightforward. Personnel services are actually down, but that's because we have not concluded our negotiations with the unions. And some of the higher paid people have left and they've been replaced by people lower on the scale. So right now we're showing a decrease, but that is to be seen later what's actually going to happen out of that. Employee benefits also have increased, but that's going to be right along with your healthcare expenses increasing. Contractual services are up slightly. Commodities are up 11%. That is primarily gas. That's the big driver there. There's some ups and downs in the different lines, but the gas is really driving that. And there is a increase in the forfeited fund accounts. And I don't recall why we did that. But the forfeited fund accounts are only spent if we actually have the funds. So if the funds come through one of the police department sources, which is the COPS, DUI fund, the 1505 fund, then we spend money out of there. So it kind of offsets it. It'll increase the revenue, and at the same time, the expense will go up. Okay. And that, I believe, is all there is to say about the police at this time. Okay. Next up is Public Works. Public Works is showing an 8% increase, but I want to reflect that that's also includes the $50,000 of the ARPA funds. So it's not really as big an increase. And as police, with police department, there is a lot of fuel expended in Public Works, and that was a big driver in the increase in funds. And there's also under contractual services, there is a couple of mandatory tests that have to be run. One is a sewer scanning and WMRD testing. Is that correct, Matt?
Smoke testing.
Smoke testing. That referred to as smoke testing? Okay. So there's not a whole lot of change in Public Works. So when we're all done in the operating fund, Just making sure that, that was just a one-page typo. We are going to expend about $335,000 more than we did last year. But we are still going to have, after all the operating expenditures over, we are done. Compared to the operating revenues, we're expecting a surplus of $634,086. Now, some of that money will have to be transferred to other funds. Debt service will get roughly $271,125, and the IMRF retirement fund will get $235,482, leaving with a total transfers of $506,607, leaving us with a projected surplus of $127,480. Any questions? If there's no questions, I'll just move right on to the next fund. Next up is the garbage fund. And the garbage fund is pretty much kind of on autopilot right now. Last year, we came in pretty much right on budget, and we're expecting no major changes for 2023. So the charges for services are going to be the same, and we're hoping that all of our costs of garbage collections stay relatively the same, which will give us a slight surplus for the year. The Illinois Municipal Retirement Fund, IMRF, is part of our property taxes help fund that, and the other part is the transfer from the general fund. And the reason we do that is the transfers from the general fund help cover our Social Security tax, Medicare, and unemployment tax that we have to pay on all of our employees. You'll notice that it's showing a negative 93,767 at the bottom. That's because we have funds in that fund. We have money in that fund at the beginning of the year. So we're just spending down some of the money and not taking it out of the general fund and moving it over here. Any questions on that? Either I'm out of line or this is out of line. Okay, for fiscal 23, our CDBG fund, which is our community development block grants, we have one project scheduled. It's an alley project, and it's the alleys behind the new senior complex, and I believe one other in that same area. We have gotten a grant for $200,000. And then we're going to have to supply $189,070, which will be part of our rollover bond. For those of you that are new, the rollover bond can be spent on debt service and capital projects. So we're going to fund the village's portion of this project out of proceeds from the annual rollover bond. And this is one of those funds that whatever we go in should all be spent every year. And sometimes we come in under budget and it ends up having a balance, but we just try to use that in the following year after that. Next up, guys, I just want to check here. Did I run by MFT?
Yeah.
There we go. We weren't out of order. I was out of order. Okay. The MFT fund is our motor fuel tax fund. And we get, based upon our population, part of the state's motor fuel tax. And we also get Build Illinois grants that are coming through there too. So we collect taxes, and we have one more disbursement on our grants to add more money to this fund this year. It still has a fairly healthy cash balance in it. And on this year, we are going to do 2 streets out of this fund, 12th Avenue and 10th Avenue. That 300 and 250 is just us spending some of the money that we've taken in prior years. Okay, now we should be back in order. Okay. The Roosevelt TIF has a lot going on this year. It's still producing significant increment. And we've got enough money in the bank right now that we're actually earning some decent interest off of it. This year, there's a series of things going on. And a couple of these line items have been increased, specifically legal services and professional services have been increased due to a study that we're doing on what's the best way to move forward as the Roosevelt Road TIF expires. And we're looking into creating a new TIF where we will incorporate the part of Roosevelt that we did not get to, plus the old 17th Avenue TIF, which has been underwater since it was first designated and is just now today, 11, 12 years, even generating any increment. So the hope is that we will be able to somehow reestablish a new TIF where the development still needs to take place. But with the funds that we have in there, we have a couple different things going on. We are putting aside money for parking lots, alleys, and the, I call it Streetscape East. Basically what we did the Streetscape project from 17th to 25th, we want to do it the other way, 17th until 13th, I believe is the cutoff street. So we're going to try to get that done. And the other expense in there is carry over from last year was the $40,000 for the parking kiosk for one of the parking lots. And then we always have that contingency for the Brownsfield loan. At some point, hopefully that will go away. But if we sell the property at between 13th and 14th, we may have to pay that loan back. Any questions about Roosevelt?
Yes, I have one question.
Sure.
The access deficiency revenue over expenditures,
Cash. We actually have cash in that TIF has got its own bank account, and that's cash that's built up over the last 15 years, basically.
okay.
Yeah. So there's actually cash in the bank to spend.
Thank you.
And I just because and it's hard to grasp, but when I started working at the Village in 2009, the western part of Roosevelt was planned and designed, but because the state is heavily involved in this stuff, it can take forever before the work actually gets done. I believe it was 2015, Matt, does that sound right? Before we actually did the streetscape project. So it went for basically 5 years before the state got around to saying, okay, you can do the work now. So, and that's part of why we've got the legal fees and TESCA involved in this, is because this money needs to be safeguarded to pay for that project. We'd love to get that project done in the next 12 months, but in reality, working with all the different parties that we have to work with, it can take forever. The next TIF that we have to talk about is the 17th Street TIF. I just hit that too fast. I did. The 19th Street TIF is the area over by the mall where Chase Bank is, Advanced Auto, Jimmy John's. That area was developed a few years ago, and in the development agreement is the developer is going to get the tax increment until we reach a certain amount. So whatever we get in increment each year is expensed out. Well, we pay our audit services and then we give the rest of the money to the developer each year. So it's pretty much a self-running type budget item here. If we get 130, we're going to give them 130. If we get 105, we'll give them 105. And that takes us to the next TIF, which is now it says Roosevelt. Why is it doing this? Now 17th Avenue. 17th Avenue TIF has been established for quite a while, and it is just now generating some increment. For those that are not familiar, it basically starts at Baton, comes down to Roosevelt. It is the one where we have not been very successful in getting increment in the past, and we're going to try to use that with part of the Roosevelt to start a new TIF that will hopefully be able to fund the development of that area going forward. So right now, there's no expenditures expected out of there other than our annual audit, but this will come into play in whatever we do with the other TIF when it expires. All right, this is a big one. Debt service. So we will get property taxes coming in and transfers from the general fund and the proceeds of the bond rollover, the rollover bond. And this year, we will be paying back last year's rollover bond, the principal and interest on 2003A, the principal and interest on 2015, and the interest on capital bonds, the capital bond of 2018. What's significant about this year is this year will pay off 2003A and 2015. So the only outstanding bond that we will have is the capital appreciation bond that we use to build the 911 center. And then the annual rollover bond will then become the funding source for that bond. So we're going to be decreasing the amount of debt we have outstanding substantially this year, and we'll only have one outstanding issuance of any size. Anyone have any questions on that?
So Tom, on page 13, and I'm missing something, it says transfer from the general fund.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yes, I can tell you. I know exactly what you're going to ask. So the transfer from the general fund is a larger number. Was it 271? But when we do the bond issuance, we're going to transfer money to CDBG and the capital fund to help pay for capital projects. So I'm recording all of that money when we do the bond issuance into the debt service fund and then moving the cash to those funds where we need it to support projects. So that's a net number. Good catch. Dave gets an A today. All right. Now, there's a lot of activity this year in the capital fund too. And this is thanks to the state of Illinois. They have appropriated $2.5 million and correct me if I say it, DECO grant? Yes. And a DECO grant. So we're going to get $2.5 million in revenue. We're also going to get another 235 for the bike route, 25th Avenue bike route grant, and another 400 has been set aside to replace the fire department roof. So we have a little bit of money coming in, and we plan to expense that money, I should say, primarily doing 16th Avenue, 14th Avenue, and 11th Avenue. There are a bunch of items that we had No, I don't have that list here. I'll see what I can do from memory. You guys can step in. There's other items that we had provided to the state when we applied for this grant, including equipment for the police department, money to do a demo and put up a fence on a piece of village-owned property. And we also have in this dollar amount, I've got, but this is a carryover. This is the 2 trucks for Matt. It seems like there's one more. Parking lot, the fire department parking lot. Right, but that has money being carried over from the prior year. This won't be a DECO funded project, but it is still in our budget. So we went from having no projects last year to having a whole bunch of projects this year. And that takes us to our next place where we got a lot going on. And that's the water fund. A lot of the money that we had budgeted last year, the water fund did not get spent because we did not close on the loan. But we are going to be able to take, excuse me, there's a lot of stuff going on in here. We are going to be getting proceeds from the IEPA loan, and we will be using those proceeds to do a whole series of projects. Some of this money is getting stuck into professional services for project design engineering, project construction engineering, and we have some other testing items in there too. And the other big item in here is in the past we have an account called the water tower account where we put all the funds that came from our antenna rentals. And that's where I put the $460,000 from this contract that we were just talking about in the board meeting this week, for the, what do you call it, lease of the space for the next 30 years, the right of way? Easement, is that called a lease, I guess? An easement, okay. And that's the proceeds from that easement. So there's 460 coming in from the easement and a large sum coming in from the loan, and that will allow us to do a bunch of projects that have all been outlined in the loan documents, and that's how I ended up breaking up between what's in professional services and what are in the biggest item is improvements to water mains of 4.3 million, and that's being funded through that loan. And then most of the other stuff is our normal budget items. We're doing so much work on the water system. In the past, people say, well, why do you want to budget 200,000 here and 200,000 there? If we don't spend it, we just save it. But if something happens, it's in the budget and we can fix it. And that's why we do it. Okay. Any questions? Well, that's pretty much sums up all the departments and all the funds. We will be having a special board meeting to vote on this budget, and that it's 6. You know, Kevin, 6? 20, but no, what time? 6 o'clock? Yeah, the hearing is 6 o'clock. 6, and then we'll have it. We have to have a budget hearing at 6, and then in that evening they will vote on the budget. So if you have any questions between now and then, please reach out to me, the department head, or reach out to me and the department head, and we will get your answers for you. Other than that, I think we're done. Thank you. Oh, yeah, well, that's not me, that's Tim. And you want me, instead of you guys going up there, you want me to just introduce Tim? And next up, Do I have yours? No. Do you have it on a? It's on the laptop? Oh, by the laptop. And everyone, this is Tim Hicks, our finance director, who is going to go over, do an overview of the fiscal 20 audit. Yours.
Good evening, everyone. So we just completed fiscal 20's audit, so just want to go over this very quickly. No, I don't think so. Yeah, there we go. All right, so there's 4 types of audit opinions. So an auditor's opinion is a formal statement made by the auditors concerning the client's financial statement. So there's 4 types. There's an unqualified opinion, which is basically a clean report. There's a qualified opinion, and there's a disclaimer of opinion and an adverse opinion. And the only one that I highlighted is an unqualified opinion because that's what the village has received and for fiscal 20 and for all of the fiscal years that I can think of. I don't. So that's the highest and best opinion that can be given. So that is what we received for fiscal 20. Okay. So now just go through some highlights from fiscal 20. Go through the governmental funds. And so here you'll see we had total assets in the general fund about 7.4 million. Roosevelt TIF about 4.3, capital projects about 800,000, and then all of the non-major governmental programs we had about 4.3, total assets about 16 million. So when you look, fund balance for the general fund was about 2.3, for the Roosevelt TIF about 3.5. When you look at capital projects, a little over 800,000. So really what the fund balance represent is the cumulative net profit or net excess over the years. So this really shows that the village is in good standing with our fund balance for our governmental programs, for our governmental funds, excuse me. So here's the revenues for the governmental funds. I keep wanting to say programs. So when you look at the general fund, it had about $15.3 million in revenues. The TIF had a little over 500,000. The capital projects about 1.3, and then all combined, the non-majors had about 3.2. So for the general fund, we had a slight deficit of about 127,000 for the fiscal year. Roosevelt TIF had an excess of 349. Capital projects, again, about 1.6 deficit, and that's just mean that we spent more in this year than just what we took in. And for the non-major governmental funds, had a deficit of about 2.4. But when you look at the change in combining with the transfers in and out between the funds, the change is what is added to the beginning year balance, fund balance. And you can see that all governmental funds ended with a positive fund balance for fiscal 20. Any questions as I go through this?
You said it ended with a positive?
Yeah, for our fund balance. So our fund balance is a positive.
Oh, is that the one, the fund balance, the end of the year, 3.1?
Correct.
Okay.
All right, so proprietary funds is our business type funds. Another name for it is enterprise funds. So this is our water and sewage funds. And you can see have about 10.3 million in assets between the two water and sewage funds. And you can see a net position of about $9.5 million. So the water and sewage funds are very solid funds. So here, again, the proprietary funds are our business-like activity funds. So this is where we receive revenue for the services that we provide. So total operating revenue about 3.3. Expenses was about 4.5, which had an operating loss of about $4.1 million for the fiscal year. You add that with the non-operating income, and we had a net change of 1.1 million. We had fund balance, net position, beginning balance of 10.7 million, which gets us to the ending fund balance of 9.5 million for the fiscal year. And the proprietary fund, because it's a business type fund, we do a cash flow for it. So when you look at the water and sewage fund, we were negative for our net cash flow. So we paid out more than what we took in terms of services, which is one of the reasons why we, chose to increase rates to slow that net cash flow of being negative. We had net income about 21,000. We had costs that transferred in from other funds of 100,000, and we bought about 50,000 in capital assets. So the net change in cash was about 800,000. We had a beginning cash balance of 4.7. So we ended the year with a cash balance of about $4 million for the proprietary funds. All right. Last is our fiduciary funds. So these are our pension and the 911 center. And so we have a net position for the pension funds about almost $50 million. And then we have about 326,000 for the 911 center. So here for the fiduciary funds, you can see what made up the additions to the funds, which is contributions from the plan members, and a big portion of that is the 3.1 is what the village paid in for the employer portion of the pension cost. We had net investment income of about 1.3, and then what you see, the real big number there is benefits paid out on the pension of about $5 million. We had a net change and net position of 252,000. You add that to a beginning balance of over $50 million to get to the net position of $49.9 million for the pension funds. So the last thing we want to talk about from the audit is our long-term obligations. So the first part is our bonds payable. The first general obligation debt is the capital project bond that was issued to build a 911 center and to renovate Village Hall. So we have an ending balance of about $12.6 or $8 million. The next one is the general obligation from direct placement. That's our rollover bond. And the unamortized premium, because the village issued the bonds at a premium, that's added to the general obligation debt. So that amount will be amortized over the life of the bond. So we'll see that number continuously go down over the life of the bond. The one number that we really need to pay attention to is our net pension liability. So when you look at, we started the year about $39.6 million. It increased about $7.6 million. We had a decrease of 4.2, and the net pension obligation ended the year about $42.9 million. And if you see the difference between an increase and decrease, that number is going to steadily increase about $3.5 million or more every year. So that's one of the things that we had a town hall about, and about issuing a pension obligation bond that would kind of level out that obligation, because that's the most significant risk to the village is our pension liability. The business type activity, those are our proprietary fund, the water and sewer fund, and you see the individuals that work in those funds. The obligation for those folks is pretty small, of about $71,000. That is it for fiscal 20's audit. Questions?
Yeah, can you just tell, just for transparency, why it took so long for us to get through the audit, what we had to go through, the pandemic and all of this stuff?
Yeah, so the first, we were really behind schedule because we couldn't get the auditors to come out to start the audit. That was the first thing. And then once we did get them started, we had to do everything remotely, and a lot of what they would do, be on site to do, we had to kind of prolong that being remote. And then we just ran into a lot of different things in terms of process and procedures that we need to shore up on our end to be able to provide them with better financial data that they can come in to audit. Now that we have fiscal 20 done, we'll post these adjustments and we'll go right into starting fiscal 21. And it's rare, but we're exploring the options of conducting 2 years of audit at the same time, fiscal 21 and fiscal 22, to get back on pace so that we don't have to scramble again once we finish one to start the next one. So if we can do them at the same time, then we'll be right back to be able to start fiscal 23's audit on schedule. And then at that time, we're looking to issue an RFP to bring in new auditors, because we've had Baker Tilly for the length of this administration and prior to. And it's good best practices to change up your auditors every 6 to 8 years to get a fresh set of eyes. So once we get caught up, that's the main thing that we'll focus on. All right. Questions? Dave, you got some?
Fiduciary funds on page 9, talk about $50 million, specifically pension trust. Do you know what percentage that is? 100%?
Well, yeah. So the fire and police are probably in the 50s and 60s in terms of their funding ratio. So this is represents just the assets that are set aside for those funds. But yeah, they're which is one of the reasons why we want to look to issue the pension obligation bonds, because that will allow us to increase that funding. We're statutorily limited in what the village can contribute to the pension funds. We get every year, this is, it's called the ARP, the annual required contribution. And that's the limitation of what the village can contribute out of its operating activities toward our fund. So the only other way to kind of shore up the pensions and make the funding ratio higher is to issue that pension obligation bond, and then what you do is you smooth out the consistency of the returns that's needed to get the funding ratios up, because you have that funding, you issue the bonds, you get all of that proceeds up front, and you're able to put that into the pensions to shore them up, and then you pay that out over the life of the bond, right? So we'll never, at this rate, we'll never get those ratios up, because you have more, because when you look at the benefits, right? So, if you just look at purely contributions, right? 3.6, we're paying out 5, right? So we're never going to catch up, right? So even at that rate, we're constantly behind, right? And with our obligation of, we can only put in what we, the 3.1 or whatever that comes out to be, and we're paying out 5 million plus every year, those numbers are never get even. Because what you have is, you have retirees going out at the highest salary level. They're being replaced by entry-level folks. Their contributions into the plan don't pay with what the folks that are retiring at those salaries, because and then the retirees are outnumbering the new employees, 2 to 1, 3 to 1, and so those ratios just consistently are off, and you're constantly playing a catch-up game, because as more people retire and less are contributing into the plan, then those funding ratios continue to decrease and go lower and lower, and to get to kind of ratios that are pretty scary for some municipalities.
Thank you.
All right.
Trustee Shelby, want to go back up there so we can close the meeting out? We can go back up there.
Okay, are there any questions?
No, Finance Chair, I'm good. I thought it was well planned out. And I'm sure my department heads put a lot of time and effort into this, so thank you for supporting this. And I thought the presentations were very well done by our budget officer and our finance director. For this to be on the agenda, definitely, I would recommend that. So if you want to pass that on to the mayor, for it to be on the agenda for the rest of our trustees to
Definitely.
see it. So I'm good with it.
Okay. Thank you so much. Like Trustee Abraham said, the proposal was very detailed, and I really appreciate it. I'd like to motion
For an adjournment? Sure.
adjournment.
I'll make a motion to adjourn the meeting. And the time, I don't have the time, sorry. Sorry, Finance Chair.
8:38? Okay. Motion to adjourn.
Make a
I
motion to adjourn at 8:38 then, that's fine.
Okay. Thank you.
We're good?
Yes,
Thank you.
thank you for coming,
Meeting
everyone.
is adjourned.
Thank
There you
you.
go.
Yes, it was adjourned.